Awesome. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Beth Helfrich, Events Manager here at Main Street Books. And on behalf of Ada and the entire staff, welcome to our virtual gathering space. We're so glad that you are here with us tonight to kick off our first annual summer thriller series at Main Street Books. Listen, when the heat sets in, we find that readers head either for a steamy poolside beach read or they reach for an ice in your veins thriller. And so over the next 2 weeks, we're going dark here at Main Street Books, and we are thrilled, you see what I did there, to begin with an evening celebrate the release of this incredible page turner, Survive the Night, and in the company of two of the best suspense writers around. So first up, we have our incredible conversation partner, Taylor Adams. Welcome, Taylor.
Hi.
Hi.
You for having me here.
You're so well. We're so thrilled you're here, all the way from the what was a very steamy West Coast. And this is the beauty of virtual gathering spaces. Taylor is the author of No Exit. He graduated from Eastern Washington University with the prestigious Edmund G. Yarwood Award. His directorial work has screened at the Seattle True Independent Film Festival, and he's an avid fan of suspenseful fiction and film, including this work by Riley Sager. He lives in Washington State, where he has been staying cool by reading. And in company here, our celebrated writer tonight is Riley Sager. Welcome, Riley.
Hello.
We're so glad you're here. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. Riley is the pseudonym of an author who lives in Princeton, New Jersey. His first novel, Final Girls, was a national and international bestseller that has been published in more than 24 countries and won the ITW Thriller Award for Best Hardcover Novel. Sager's subsequent novels, The Last Time I Lied, Lock Every Door, and Home Before Dark, which received the Crimson Scribe Award by Suspense magazine, were all New York Times bestsellers, and Survive the Night has had such an exciting launch as well. I should add that Taylor's latest is Hairpin Bridge, also incredible. It's sitting behind over on the shelf. Before I turn it over to the two of them, I just want to remind a few housekeeping tips. Number one, please stay on mute. You'll note that this is a meeting, so we are all in the room together. You're welcome to leave your video on if you'd like, but please do not hit the mute button. And for optimal viewing, I would recommend that you go into speaker mode. And if you have questions during the event, please load them into the chat. After this conversation and back and forth about their writing and process and their two incredible books, I will be able to pull some questions out of the chat to ask the two of them. So without further ado, I'm so excited to turn it over to the two of you in order to, in Riley's own billing, talk writing, suspense, and all of the horrible things that can happen on the highway. Take it away, Taylor.
Thank you. I am so excited to get to talk about Survive the Night with you, Riley. Obviously, I absolutely loved it. It is tense, it's twisty, it's surprising, it's got this intoxicating atmosphere from its setting, and it's just a beautifully shaped story. And it never wastes a moment, never wastes a word, and it delivers on every promise that the premise has and every promise that it makes, and even some promises that you didn't even realize it was making. And for me in particular too, this story just kind of hits all of the boxes for my tastes. Like it's very much my kind of thriller. There's a resourceful heroine, there's a tight time frame, there's this constant sense of pressure and urgency, and something is just always about to happen. And there's a real feeling of danger that just never lets up. And best of all, it is consistently surprising. Like, when you have just a few locations and just a few characters, it's really, really hard to surprise readers. And this one pulls it off. And I love this book.
Thank you so much. Because as you know, I loved No Exit. And you set the bar so high with that kind of thing. Because I knew when I was writing Survive the Night, I'm like, oh crap. How am I good? Like, this is not going to be as good as No Exit, because No Exit is like perfect. And as we met at Thriller, because I read No Exit, literally, I never do this. I read it in a single night. I started at 7 o'clock being like, I guess I'll start this book. And at like 2 a.m., I was like finishing it off, and I was like, I cannot turn the pages fast enough. And then like I tweeted about it, or like on Instagram, and then a couple months later, we were at Thriller Fest, and
Yes.
you came up to me, and I didn't know who you were, and you're like, "Hi, I'm Taylor Adams." Like,
making it so awkward.
I was like, "I'm such a huge fan." So yeah, that was so cool. But yeah, it's really, as you well know, like it's really difficult to set like do something with just a confined space and a small cast of characters that is in basically real time. And I don't know, like how did you come at it with your books? Because Hairpin Bridge has a similar, vibe where it's
Yeah,
just a couple people in sort of one space and danger and roads and cars.
a lot of it just comes down to just rewriting for me, because I mean, my first draft is always just so messy and so confused, and the just all over the place. And I think bit by bit, just with one draft after another, I really start to enjoy the rewriting process after a certain point. And it's like I find the right spot for all the information, and then I start to feel good about it. But yeah, it's so hard to do, and it's really hard, especially when you only have, it's like a card trick. What you have is what you're working with. These characters, this location. There's nowhere you can escalate to, so it's like you have to kind of dig deeper into the characters. It's tough.
That's what I found with because with Survive the Night, for those of you but you all probably, if you're tuning in, I'm assuming you know this. It's about a girl named Charlie who's leaving school, and her roommate and best friend was recently murdered, and so she has to leave campus. She's guilt-ridden and grief-stricken, and she gets a ride with a man named Josh, whom she meets at the campus ride board. And the ride board thing, I mean, I'm dating myself. Like, the ride board was huge in the 90s on college campuses. And it was where people put their personal information on a bulletin board for everyone to see, saying, I need to go here. Stranger, here's my phone number. Call me and I'll get in your car with you, and you can take me to this place and I'll pay for gas. And it is insane to think about that was a thing that we did not too long ago. But so she meets Josh at the ride board. She agrees to get a ride with him to Ohio. And really, as soon as they get on the highway, she starts to suspect that he is not all he says he is, and might be a very, very dangerous man. And it was very difficult to, like you talked about, escalation. Like you need to go somewhere. And so you can't start like pedal to the metal, but you can't have it be boring. And so it's very hard to just notch it up slowly but surely throughout this trip. And I too like did it with the dialogue. Like, a lot of the book is really just Charlie and Josh in a car talking, and she's suspicious of him and he's suspicious of her, wondering how much she knows about him. And it's this whole elaborate mind game that's told a lot through just dialogue of two people. And I rewrote that and rewrote that and rewrote that, and almost treated it as if it were like a play, just because every word of that dialogue had to mean something.
Yeah. And I love how, like, I can definitely see it as a play. I love how, like, the dialogue scenes, they unfold almost like action scenes, because there's really clear goals and there's deflections, and there's like, it unfolds basically like an action scene, or like a volleyball match where a ball is bouncing back and forth. There's such a sense of purpose behind every word.
And that was new for me, because I don't disregard the dialogue. I mean, I always like the dialogue to express something, but in this case, like, it was really thinking about the dialogue and the exact words they were saying, and that was something new for me. And it was a little bit difficult, but also a little bit of a fun challenge. All of this was a fun challenge. And do you like to do that when you're coming up with like your terror on the highways books as well. Like just
Totally. I love dialogue is so fun to write when, once I'm certain that I've got, the story beats in place. Like I love dialogue. I think it is so fun to just, as like an expression of characters' goals and just as an expression of characters, trying to work around each other. And some of my favorite scenes are, the kinds of scenes that are in Survive the Night where you have, a protagonist and an antagonist, and there's an element of danger, and maybe one wants to struggle, one wants to attack, but for whatever reason they can't. And so they're forced to talk to each other instead of taking more direct action. I find that so fun.
it really was the whole book really was a challenge. When I got the idea, and does this happen where you get an idea and you're like, yes, this is the book I'm working on, and then you start to work on it, and there's this moment of reckoning where you're like, oh, this is the book I have to do now, and I'm not sure I'm able to do it, and oh boy, okay, I guess I'm stuck now. This is where we're going. And it's just it's scary but exciting, but mostly scary.
I feel like there's always this weird backwards bell curve for me where like I start it and I'm really excited and I'm like, this is awesome. And then I get into it and I'm like, oh my God, there's so many problems I have to solve. This sucks, this sucks, this sucks. And then after, many more months, I kind of curve back up to, okay, I really like this because I've, solved the problems that were bothering me. But man, like that middle passage is just a long, dark slog for me.
Getting through the it sucks like months.
Yes.
That's how long, like it can be months. I really think the difference between like a published writer and an unpublished writer is like, we're like, okay, it sucks, but I'm going to keep writing. It still sucks. I'm still writing. Oh boy, it still sucks. And then eventually there is that moment where the suckiness dissipates like fog.
Yes.
And then you realize it doesn't suck.
Like,
and I don't know how it gets that way.
Yeah, it's like flipping a switch, because I never quite figure out like when the turning point is, or when it's like I've broken the back of all those problems to solve. But yeah, it's a magical moment when all the fog of suck clears.
And that is the most fun part for me afterwards. Is when the fog of suck dissipates, and then you want to write.
Yes, because you're doing the fun stuff.
And then you're excited about writing.
Yes. So I'm curious.
And
like the setting, the time period, the music, there's this real tangible atmosphere. And also, best of all, no cell phones. I hate cell phones as a thriller writer.
They are the devil for thriller writers. They're awful.
Oh, but what made you settle on the 90s? Since the 90s isn't the only decade without cell phones.
Well, it was because I knew that there couldn't be cell phones in this world, because the book would literally be 5 pages. She would meet Josh at the ride board. She would Google him, look up his Facebook, and then say, "No thanks," and that would be the book. It would be done. So I knew it had to be in the past, and I really picked 1991 because, and this makes me sound so lazy, and I guess it might have been a little bit of laziness, but I was a senior in high school in November of 1991. And so I remember it so well. I knew I did not need to do any research. Like when you delve into the past, there's always, okay, when did this happen? What happened on this date? What was going on here? I didn't need to do any of that. And so I knew what songs were playing on the radio back then. I knew what I was listening to on my own tape deck back then. I knew what movies were playing or had played. And so it just made it a whole lot easier for me to create this world, because I knew the time period so well. And it was a pandemic. And I knew that it was hard to write during a pandemic, and I needed to make it as easy on myself as possible. And so that was why 1991. And it turns out it's nice because it was just, maybe it was like 5 years or so before cell phones started to become, like, the first time I saw a cell phone used like in a piece of pop culture, I think was Scream. in 1996.
They used to be so big, and they'd have the antennas that would, and then like a little flat part that pops out.
Yeah, and they were just like a shoebox that you held up to.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so I wanted it to be just outside of the realm of modern technology.
But it's
So
so
where it was like
super easy.
not too far away,
Yeah.
but
Cool. So it's really tough to talk about the twists of Survive the Night without risking spoilers, so I will tread exceptionally carefully. One thing I really love about this book is how economically every single twist is set up, and really early on too. So, you know, nothing is unearned, nothing comes out of left field in the bad way, because, you know, there's a good way and a bad way to surprise readers. You know, when you form the story, did you outline first, so you had all the twists kind of laid out and you had like a roadmap? That's a bad pun given what the book is about.
no, I've been full of like the bad like driving puns like this past week, because it's a natural fit for them.
Yeah, it's hard to avoid. So do you outline first, or do you let the twists kind of organically surprise you as you write it the first time?
It was a hybrid. Normally I outline, and Home Before Dark was outlined to the like every chapter and everything that ever happened was outlined so it fit just like this. I really wanted to not do that this time. I wanted to be a bit spontaneous. So I knew the plot, and I knew, to use another sort of driving pun, I knew the destination. I didn't know how we were going to get there. So that was the fun part, is figuring out which road are we going to take here to get to this destination that I have in mind. And let's just hop in the car and drive and see how we get to where we're going. So I knew enough to sprinkle in clues and red herrings and things like that, but I didn't outline it all.
Cool. When
Do you outline?
I do outline pretty heavily, and I'll usually do an outline after every draft too. And then when I'm writing the draft, I try to, you know, if I see an interesting direction, I try to write with that in mind. And then if it's a dead end, I just, you know, delete it and start over again the next day. So I try to do like a hybrid between outlining and just seat of the pants. But I think I am definitely in the outlining camp. I feel like, especially after a first draft, because my first drafts are always very, very lean. They're usually like 20 to 30,000 words shorter than whatever the book is going to end up being. And I feel like I have to, first of all, have confidence in the story and have like all the bones in the right place and have like a, you know, a skeleton, because it's an underweight, you know, version of itself. And then I can start layering in the fun stuff. But yeah, I've always been like adding more, instead of being a take stuff away when you rewrite, like an add more in, because it's hideously underweight kind of writer.
That's interesting. Like I never thought of that. I mean, this one was sort of that. It clocked in a little bit shorter than my usual book, and then we did add some meat to the bones, but not a whole lot. But I knew kind of intentionally that it was going to be shorter than my other books. Like I get, and I'm sure you get this too, where people say, because I just said it about No Exit, oh, I read this in a day. And when that was first said to me, I was a little bit like insulted, because I worked for 9 months on this book. Like, do you know, take your time, savor it a little bit more, please, for the love of God. But now it's like just the utmost compliment, because it's just riveting. And so this book, I wrote it for the read it in a day people. Like I wanted them to read it in a day and just be exhausted at 2 a.m. like I was after reading No Exit. Just be like, wow, that was great. That was a ride.
Awesome. So
just FYI, like it is now pouring down rain here. So I hope that like the power stays on. We have like massive thunderstorm rolling through.
Oh, yikes. Definitely not seeing that.
Not where you are, no.
So with Survive the Night, so there's like this constant sense of danger just like throughout. You know, how do you keep that level of tension even in scenes where, you know, there's just so much ambiguity and so much unknown and so much of it is just, you know, waiting to find out? How do you keep that level of tension high?
it was really just trying to think of ways to keep Charlie in that car, and to also think of ways that Josh could keep Charlie in that car. And so, and we have to, I guess, talk about the movies in our mind. And that's, I don't think it's a spoiler because it's pretty, but one of the things I thought about, okay, how does she keep staying in this car? And it's a logical reason why she's staying in the car.
Right.
And so that was one of the things I came up with, was the movies in her mind, and that's what Charlie calls them. But really, they're hallucinations. Like, it is a deep-seated psychosis that Charlie suffers from, where she deals with trauma and stress by picturing the events happening as if it's a movie, and it's this nice, like, self-defense mechanism for her, where it creates a distance, and so she can mentally handle it. And normally that is a good thing, because her, that's, people need a way to, like, process trauma and grief. But for her, it's not a good thing when you're in a car with someone and you don't know sometimes what's really happening or what's a movie in your mind. And when you're in a car with someone who catches on to this, exploit it. So there's a lot of mind games being played here. It's Josh playing mind games with Charlie. It's Charlie playing mind games with herself unintentionally. And it is me playing mind games with the reader. And so I wanted to keep them off balance quite a bit by having certain scenes that aren't real. And
I love that.
Then afterwards being like, oh, that wasn't real, but this one is it? And so that was a natural way to really maintain the tension, knowing the reality of the situation right there is a great tension builder.
Yeah, it's like the book equivalent of a jump scare. And I love how, you use that to keep the tension high. And then avoiding spoilers, there's even like what I would call like a double jump scare in rapid succession that I loved.
Yeah, part of the problem though was, like, I was so in love with this idea that in the first couple drafts, I went way overboard with it. I had, like, movie in her mind within a movie within her mind within a movie within her mind, and it's just,
Inception.
it was almost like Inception levels of confusion. And I had to pull back, because even I was like, readers are going to be so sick of this device right now. So I need to just not. And there was one that I loved. I loved it so much, but I had to get rid of it. So it hurt, but it was one of those things, and I'm sure you've had this too, where you're in love with a particular scene or a subplot or something, and you just have to be like, this doesn't fit. And
Right.
It actually, as much as I love it, might make the book worse. And so it has to go.
When you can feel yourself like twisting the book, the other things around it to try and accommodate this thing that you like, I'm always like, oh, dang it, I know what that means. I have to kill
Yeah,
it.
I one of the events I've been doing with Jeff, and he called them give me a break moments, where we all put in our books moments that the reader will be like, oh, give me a break, and just throw the book down. And so it's like, always be cognizant of the give me a break moments and try to get rid of as many as possible. But I mean, I think we all still have a few give me a break moments in the books. At least I do. There's a couple in Survive the Night where I can see the reader going, Charlie, what are you doing? And that was part of the fun, where I love the character of Charlie, but she's also really frustrating at times and really maddening at times. And you would not do what she's doing, but in her own way of thinking, it makes sense to her.
I've always, and maybe this is just because I make a lot of mistakes in person, but I've always found like making mistakes is a really like an organic character trait. And I love, like, one of my favorite things is seeing characters make mistakes, learn from them, and then adapt and like have that be part of their arc. I've always thought that's a really, and I can't remember where I absorbed this, but just like a saying that, you know, horror is characters we love making decisions we hate. And
That's
that
a
really,
really great description. Yeah. No, and I just I like a character that isn't perfect.
right.
Like I really I get bored when there's some thrillers and it's like he is wealthy and she's fabulous and she has perfect hair and perfect clothes and she's so stylish and she's so smart. And it's like, give me a hot mess. Like I want to read about the hot messes.
Right, right. That is, it is so much easier for me to relate to somebody who's just in way over their head and just adapting the best they can in a situation that, you know, they don't know all of the dimensions of the situation. All they've got is the information available to them. That is 1,000 times more, you know, involving to me and more relatable.
So speaking of hot messes, I'm gonna have a question for you. Lena
Yeah,
in
yes.
Hairpin Bridge, she's kind of a hot mess. And so like she sort of does like I mean, she's different from Charlie, but she does make very questionable decisions that in her mind make sense. And so did you find that difficult to write?
It was kind of like you know, because a lot of the book is kind of like an exercise in, you know, okay, stick with me. These decisions appear very illogical, but when you see, you know, the full kind of picture of where she's coming from, you'll kind of see that, okay, you know, she's in a bad place. The one outcome that she has not planned for is surviving. This is essentially a suicide mission. You know, it's because that's something that the book builds to. You know, early on, she basically looks like a cow going into a you know, up the steps of the slaughterhouse willingly, and it's hard to, you know, you gotta kind of just tell the readers, okay, go with me. This is going to make sense. And from Lena particularly, it's kind of Hairpin is honestly about grief and about just where that, just kind of the tailspin that can put you in, and the kind of self-destructive you know, mode that can put you in, because Lena has a mission and like she's planned for every outcome of that mission, but her own life is just completely not, you know, it doesn't factor into it. And so yeah, it is really tricky to write, I guess, a character without a sense of self-preservation, because that's an important part of keeping a reader engaged. Absolutely, it's tricky.
Yeah, and I think that like it's crazy that like if you guys want to do like a double feature of reading, you could do like, because they're so similar in a lot of ways, yet they're also so different. And that's the thing, when I first, you know, saw the plot of Hairpin Bridge, I was like, oh, I think I also wrote that book in a way. And then I read it and like, no, it is not. But it is like there's talk of how grief can affect you and just put you out of your mind. Some, in Charlie's case, quite literally, and making questionable decisions that seem questionable to others, but to the main characters make a lot of sense, and just really in a confined space on the road with a dangerous man. And so that's, I really enjoyed reading it to see like how different the books really are. And so what do you think is that, I mean, because between this and No Exit, like I would hate to go on a car trip with you because like you might try to kill me. And so, and notice I was waiting for like the denial. No, I wouldn't. And you're like, yeah, maybe.
No, I can't really blame that on the internet connection. My internet connection is fine. No, I really like confined settings, but I really like them to also be really relatable. I think that's, you know, whether it's a rest stop, whether it's just a derelict bridge, or, you know, I mean, I think we both get a lot of, I almost made another really bad pun. I almost
You were going to say mileage, weren't you?
Mileage out of a highway. But yeah, I think when there's that element of relatability, like, you know, we know what it's like to be in a car with somebody, you know, as a passenger. We don't know what it's like to be in a car with somebody who might be a murderer or might not be. And like having it grounded in like a really relatable, concrete human experience, like that's what really interests me in a thriller. And it's why I find it, I mean, I like other kinds of thrillers too, but I always find it a little harder to invest in something that takes place, you know, in combat or something that I don't have any frame of reference for.
Right. There is something about we've all been in a car on a highway. And so there's something romantic about driving. And when, you know, like not romantic, but you know what I mean? Like just there's just something about being on the open road that there is this kind of anything can happen, really. Like you could get a flat tire, there could be an accident, there could be pouring down rain that's going on right outside this window. There could be so many things. And there's so many interesting things along the way and potential places to stop. And like I love driving at night. And the stretch of road that Charlie and Josh travel is one I'm intimately familiar with because my parents, like I'm in New Jersey, I grew up in the middle of Pennsylvania, and to get there, we take Interstate 80. And so that's how I get home to see my parents. And I was just there, you know, traveling that road on Saturday. And my parents would always think it was weird. Like when I, you know, visit them and then come back to New Jersey, I would wait to leave until like 9 o'clock at night. And they're like, why don't you stay and leave in the morning? Or why don't you leave earlier? And it's like, because I kind of like just driving at night. And it's just, for me, there's something really cool about just being in the car on a mostly empty highway, driving at night. And I think it's ripe for dramatic potential. And that's what I kind of wanted the book to capture a little bit.
Yeah, and speaking of, so, you know, you pay homage to a lot of really classic Hollywood films, and all of them are really universally beloved for very good reason. I was wondering, do you have any guilty pleasure movies, or maybe even out and out bad movies that still kind of have a special place in your heart?
Well, I don't believe in guilty pleasures because like I don't think you should feel guilt over anything that you watch that like you enjoy.
That is a good attitude. I like that.
Now there are some that are highly entertaining. One that's actually good, and people don't believe me until they've seen it themselves. Wild Things, starring Nev Campbell, Denise Richards, Matt Dillon, and Kevin Bacon. It's from 1998. It is so trashy, so wonderfully on purpose trashy. And the trashiness is used as a device to disguise how utterly smart and brilliant and deceptive that movie is. It's really, I recommend it to everyone. It's great.
I'm going to add that to my list because I have not seen it. I've heard of it. Like I know of the title, but okay, I need to see this.
Yeah, it's so weird because sometimes the acting is so terrible, but it's done on purpose. And I've never seen a movie like that that's like purposely trying to be bad so it can surprise you later with just how good it really is. So it's one of my favorites.
Huh, cool.
So what about you?
Ooh, also a 90s movie, Dante's Peak. I think it's 97.
Ooh, gosh, yes.
Volcano, small town, Pierce Brosnan. Well, he doesn't save the town from the volcano because the town gets obliterated. But I mean, I can't defend everything about that movie, but I think it is just it's a very well-made, well-shot, really ahead of its time visual effects, just a really fun, and like the second half is genuinely tense, I think. And it's one of those movies where like I'm really passionate about it, and it seems like I'm the only one.
Because there were two Volcano movies at the time.
There were, yes. You're either on Team Dante's Peak or Team Volcano, and I am for sure on Team Dante's Peak. Just
everyone was like, "Oh, Volcano's going to be the bigger, better movie," because I think it had bigger stars. but I did prefer Dante's Peak as well.
Yeah.
So, okay, Team Armageddon or Deep Impact?
Ooh, that is actually a really hard one because I have a soft spot for both of those movies.
Oh, I hated both. I hated both.
If you were casting Survive the Night as a movie, who would you pick?
Oh, this is good. There is an actress, and I always get her name wrong, her first name, Caitlin Dever. She was in, and I'm trying to think what she's been in, but she's been in so many things, and she's so good. I think she'd be a great Charlie. For Josh, gosh, oh, I see someone in Booksmart. She's from Booksmart, yes. Gosh, I don't know who I would cast as Josh. I don't know. Well,
Okay.
and you, I mean, congrats, by the way. No Exit just finished filming. Is that it, or did they start? They just finished.
Just finished, yeah, and the cast just got announced. Yeah, I'm so excited, and I mean, I'd always said, like, I feel like it's in really good hands, and then I had no idea. It's funny coincidence that it turns out they cast the Allstate guy after I kept saying the movies, and I feel like it's in really good hands. I'm really, really excited. Thank you.
And that's like, as someone who I've had Hollywood come calling, but they haven't sealed the deal yet. So like, I haven't had anything like get produced. So that must feel crazy to know that like your book is going to be a movie that people are going to see and you're going to see.
Yeah, it still doesn't feel real. I mean, it didn't feel real, years ago when the deal got made. It didn't feel real when I saw the script. It's got a really cool script too. They did a really great job. And even now, like, it still doesn't feel real yet, and it probably won't feel real to me when I've seen the movie. But it's so exciting, and I just, it's so cool. It's so cool to be able to talk about it too, because for a long time it was really hush hush.
And I'm excited to see it too. And that is the worst, when something gets optioned or something. So you have big news, and you can't tell anyone, and you're literally like, for months at a time, being like,
just squirming.
I have such cool news.
Yeah. Oh, somebody asked what the release date is. It'll be 2022 on Hulu, and that is actually all I know right now. But,
nice.
Yeah.
So I think, Beth is back. So I think it's question time.
Yes, the questions have been pouring in, and we have some really good ones. But first, I hope you guys can see there's some congratulations, some agreement that Caitlin Dever would be perfect, and boo, Hulu isn't available in Canada. You'll just have to take a road trip across the border. And then Kayla would like to know very quickly, which character is the Allstate guy?
Oh, he's going to be Ed. Dennis Haysbert is going to play Ed.
Cool.
That's good casting there.
Well, let's jump into audience questions. Thank you all. I was hoping you all would talk about film too, because I know that is a common love and thread, and so I'm glad we started delving into that too. But first question that was actually asked by a couple of different folks is, why do both of you so often write from the female perspective, and what is that experience like?
For me, it was really because of Final Girls. I knew I wanted to write about the trope of the final girl in horror movies, and it is a final girl. And so if you're writing about a final girl, it had to be written from the point of view of a woman. And that was really all the thought I gave to it. Like, I didn't think about, how would a woman react in this situation? It was like, how would this person react in this situation based on her past and her experiences and what she's like and what she's gone through. And that's the way I still think of it, where I come up with the idea first, and then my next question I ask myself is, okay, who is going to be the vessel for this story? Who is like the best type of person to tell this story? And so far it's always been women. And Taylor, is that similar to your situation?
Yeah, I think you sum it up really nicely, because I think a big part of it too is just not really overthinking it too much and not thinking too much about gender. I've always thought, I think heroines are really cool. No Exit was my third book, but it was my first time writing from a female perspective. And I remember with No Exit, my goal was just, kind of in the rest stop setup to try and write something like what I consider to be like a realistic female version of John McClane from the first Die Hard, not the latter Die Hards, but the first one. And yeah, I kind of stuck with that, I guess, and more so even with Hairpin, with Lena's set of skills.
Well, I think that women are unwisely underestimated in many situations, and that's a great thing to explore as a writer, is people underestimating someone and them coming back like, oh, you didn't want to do that, but also them a lot of times underestimating themselves, and through the course of the situation we throw themselves in, finding their strength and be like, okay, I'm more than I thought I was, and now I'm going to kick some ass. So yeah, that's really fun to do.
Yes.
I love that. And a quick follow-up question, since you did say that it started with the final girls trope. One of our attendees, I hope that I don't mispronounce her name. I think it's Kezia, wants to know, what are some of your favorite horror thriller genre tropes and why?
Oh, the tropes. I, obviously I love a good final girl. I also love the fake out. Like I love when the killer, like the maniac is dead, but they're not. And my favorite is in Halloween, when she thinks she killed him and she's in the foreground, and then in the room in the background, all of a sudden he just sits up in such a weird way. Like it's like suddenly vertical. And it's just so creepy to me. And I love a good jump scare. They can be so cheesy, but they get me every time.
I love those moments. I love all those moments that you just said. I don't know what the word would be for it, but the call is coming from inside the house moments. Those moments where you realize that somebody is very close to you without realizing up until, just now, that there's somebody in the backseat of your car or somebody standing behind you. And like a jump scare, like, it's easy to do. There's a lot of examples of it done poorly, but when it's done really well, like, it shows why it's a trope to begin with, because it works.
It does.
Awesome. Thank you. Another question that comes from a totally different angle, and this is from Courtney. Courtney is a bookstagrammer, so, book Instagrammer, and wants to know how you all feel about the bookstagramming community. She assures you she will not be offended, but also, how do you feel about negative reviews, and how do you handle that?
Ooh, I love the Bookstagram community, because like it's so great to see. If I looked on Instagram right now, I just see like this wall of like pictures of like Survive the Night, and it's amazing that so many people are excited about my books. Sometimes it's like too much to keep track of, so like I miss a whole bunch of wonderful people saying wonderful things because I just can't keep up. And then you will see the person saying not nice things. And I'm one of those people where it's like, you know what, if you don't have anything nice to say about the book, just don't tag the author. You don't have to like the book. You can say whatever you want about it. You don't need to let me know that you're saying these things.
Right, because it goes
and
like,
yeah, but I mean, it's okay to not like a book. And sometimes I think people get a little bit overboard, where they're like personally offended that they did not like a book. And you also have to understand, some books aren't for you. Like there's lots of books that I don't like or was not a fan of that have gone on to sell 1 million copies and people love, and good for them and good for the author. So yeah.
Yeah, I love it. It's really cool just to see like the interaction that you get from Instagrammers, and just that whole thing is so cool. At the same time, like as an author, I kind of have to just keep my distance, because my approach to negative reviews is I just hide from them and like don't look at them. And I found that I'm so much happier if I haven't looked at my Goodreads page and who knows how long. I haven't looked at anything on Amazon, and I'm so much happier just to not look at it, because it's not really a space for me anyways as a writer. Like that's kind of for readers to communicate and share their thoughts, and it's like, I should be separate from that, and I'm so happy to be separate from that.
Yeah, I've had to pull back a little bit because I used to try to respond to everyone except for the negative things, but it just, if you look too much, sometimes the negative stuff still sneaks in there, and so it's just a way of like self-care. It's like I don't need to read every single thing that's being said about me right now on Instagram.
Fair enough. No, none of us should, right? Okay, a couple of questions that have to do with this, horror tradition film. Sasha says, do you worry about your books being adapted to film and then the adaptation not being what you expected? So Sasha uses Kubrick's version of King's The Shining, and apparently King didn't like the adaptation, and yet that's the version that more people know. Some people love. How would you handle that?
Taylor, you want to take this one?
Yes, since you're down that pipeline, Taylor, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, with No Exit, I feel really good about it. I feel good about the people who are making it. Even if, say, I didn't, if, say, they were taking an approach that was completely, that I didn't get, I guess there's kind of a nice element of like, when somebody is making a movie about your book, like you can kind of have it both ways. If the movie turns out really good, you can be like, that was because of me. And then if it doesn't turn out good, you can be like, well, they messed it up, but my book is still here. So I think, even if I felt like it wasn't in good hands, again, to make an Allstate callback, like I'd still feel okay about it, I think, because it's like the book is its own thing. But I mean, it's a good point what you mentioned about, The Shining, because I love both the book and the movie for very different reasons. But you're right, The Shining, the movie, I think is more culturally remembered.
I think so too.
Yeah, I love movies, as like, Survive the Night is proof of that. But when it comes to that kind of thing, I'm so hands off. Like when Hollywood is like, we might want to make this into it, I'm like, here you go. I want just like, tell me when it gets made, if it gets made, and that's really all I want to be like, involved in.
Cool. Okay, another question that came from multiple folks here tonight, which is, what are you both reading, and what's on your to be read list? And then also, what are your favorite thrillers to recommend?
Right now, I just got 2 books that came out today: Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby and Falling by T.J. Newman. And I cannot wait to read them, and I will probably devour both of them like by the end of the week. Thrillers that I recommend, and I'm not just saying that because Taylor is here, I recommend No Exit to everyone. Like literally when people are like, oh, what's a good thriller? I'm like, No Exit. Here you go. No Exit. And another one, Dare Me by Megan Abbott, she's so talented, and Dare Me is my favorite of hers. And I'm a huge fan of Misery by Stephen King.
Yes. I am reading, not The Martian, Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, and loving it. I'm about halfway through. And then next on my TBR is Falling. I'm really excited for that one. And for thrillers that I would recommend, I have a lot of favorite thrillers. I guess it's hard to narrow it down. I think the one that I would go with, and this is an older book, so I mean, hopefully a lot of people have read this, but Intensity by Dean Koontz. It was one of the first books I ever read, and I think it was a really influential book to me, just about how, you can make a really small scale thriller with, just a handful of characters and just a handful of locations and make it really genuinely tense. I love intensity.
I'm gonna have to read that one. I just read his most recent one, the other Emily. Is that what it's called? I
That sounds
forget. But
familiar.
yeah,
I haven't read it. Yeah.
I feel like we can ask the audience. They seem to, they have a lot of the answers out there. Audience, do you all know the name of the last release? A couple of questions for Riley specifically. Number one, is there anything, you kind of alluded to this earlier about what you took out of Survive the Night. Is there any idea or scene that you can share with us that didn't make it into the book?
I really can't, because it's vaguely spoilerish, and so like I and also it's in hindsight, like when I was writing, I'm like this is great, but in hindsight I'm like, this is bad. Why did I ever think this would be good in this book? So it's probably a little bit embarrassing now if I described like the movie within a movie within a movie going on in her mind.
Okay, we won't force you. We won't force you to do that. Another question specific to you is, why do you write under a pen name?
Oh, that's a good question. The short answer is publishing is weird. Like, it's just basically you are only as good as your last book and how much it sells. And so I wrote 3 books under my real name, and they didn't sell like at all, like bupkis. And so I knew that I wasn't really going to be writing any more books for this particular publisher. So then I came up with the idea for Final Girls. I wrote Final Girls, and my agent said, this book is amazing. It's going to be a breakout book. It's going to put you on the map. You need a pen name. And I said, oh, why? And she said, because whatever any editor we offer this to, first thing they're going to do is look at your previous sales. And so you're going to get a really low offer. There's going to be no publicity. There's going to be nothing. And you're going to be in the same position you are right now. So we submitted it to editors blind. Like, she just said, this is a pen name and that's all I'm going to tell you. And so she didn't tell them my real name until editors made an offer. And it really worked out pretty well. And so that's the reason, because publishing is weird and in some ways unforgiving. And so they always love a bright new thing instead of someone who might have been working in the trenches for years and years and years.
Thank you. That's a fascinating backstory. Do you now have, are you attached to your pen name now? Does it feel an equal part of your identity?
Yes and no. It's weird. It's kind of like a stage name. People call me Riley. People I've never met will call me that. So it is sort of it's not a persona because I'm me, but it is the public face of me. Is kind of a good way to put it.
Mm-hmm. Another question for you, since you're on the stage, and I like this question. So, Riley, this is from Gary. In Final Girls, you wrote about what happens to the final girl after the massacre. Any chance you would write an old school slasher in the vein of Halloween or Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, but as a novel? I could see you reinventing a slasher novel in the way Wes Craven reinvented the slasher film, a la Scream.
I would read that.
I can't say anything. Okay. Because maybe is all I can say. Maybe.
I think I like that answer. We will interpret as you would like, audience here. Awesome. I think we have time for maybe one more question. I don't know if there are any more coming in from the audience at the moment. Gary loves that answer.
Excellent.
And so I will share just a couple of comments that have come in. First of all, we have several folks who have binged all of your books. Jessica, I think, is said, Jessica is freaking out with excitement because you are both Jessica's favorite authors. And so I think that, oh, we have one more question that just came in from Katie, and I'll ask this to both of you and then we'll wrap things up. But is there a character that you have written to whom you most relate?
For me, it's Charlie in Survive the Night. Like, I was a film studies major in college, like she is, and we have the same interest, and she's very much like me in a lot of ways. I don't have see movies in my mind though.
For me, it is Lena from Hairpin. I'm very different from her, but I understand what it's like to be sent kind of reeling from grief and be searching for answers.
Well, I think that is a fitting way to wrap this up. And so I'm going to grab Hairpin Bridge so everybody can see the beautiful cover here. I want to say thank you so much. These are these two incredible books that make an incredible side-by-side conversation tonight. Riley, Taylor, we are so grateful for your time, for your talent, for your books that keep us up reading all night long. There is verification in the chat that Survive the Night was read overnight. And it's a great sign. She says it's a great sign when you find yourself yelling at a book in the best of ways. So audience, thank you so much for being here on behalf of Main Street Books. If you haven't snagged a copy of either of these, you can get them both on our website. Best of luck to both of you as you wrap up your virtual tours, and we'll see you on the flip side.
Taylor, thank you so much, and thank you everyone for watching.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Good night,
everyone.
everyone.
Good night.